Hello, everyone. Ted Simpson here, ready to show you a super fun painting. I am super excited to show you this one. I tell you, some days you just throw on something and it just works, right? I saw this painting and I haven't done it in I don't know how many years, but it was part of my one a day calendar. And I'm like, you know what? Let's go back to the beginning. This is season 2, episode 3, Ebony Sea. And this is one of those paintings that starts with the black canvas but becomes so bright. Can't believe it. So, black canvas, primed with the black gesso, let it dry completely. I'm working in a bit of that liquid clear. Now, Bob, back in season 2, did not have liquid clear. He primed his canvas with his transparent crimson and transparent phthalo blue dry. Just that paint right on the dry canvas. And it's a struggle. You can do it, obviously, but if you use that tiny amount of liquid clear, I'm just wiping away the extra there, just a quick wipe down, but look how shiny that is. It's just a very thin amount. And with a clean brush, I'm picking up some of that alizarin crimson and just spreading it out. And I'll tell you that liquid clear makes it work so much easier. Now I have a lot of bright light shining on this canvas here, so it's a little easier for you to see. So definitely have some good lighting there. This color being transparent can make it tough to see. So I work it in, I spread it around, I get some more, I put in this section here, kind of a kind of like an eyeball, sort of, or an eye shape, that kind of oval almond type deal. I did cut out just a little bit of extraneous uh, loading of the palette type motions here. In these first few minutes, I've skipped out some boring bits because, as I've explained before, I don't always prepare and put my paint out on the palette. So I did skip a little bit here. I do pride myself on mostly unedited video, but I'm just so you don't have to sit there and watch me uh, put paint on the palette for 45 seconds here and make it a little easier. This angle here and a little bit of glare on the canvas is going to highlight something. No pun intended. I really want you to see because it's tough to see in just like normal lighting, but you might see a little black gap of unpainted canvas. Look at that, right where the crimson and the blue are supposed to meet. I actually left just a little bit unpainted. And I try to tell my students, you don't want that. I was able to get around it. I'll come back to this issue, but I just wanted you to mark that you see how the crimson and the blue don't exactly touch. That's it. All right. We'll come back to that. So we are doing some cleaning of the brushes today, and you want to um, really get that paint thinner out of it. Don't leave paint thinner when you're using liquid clear. They can react and do some weird stuff. Those two base coats, or the paint thinner and the liquid clear, not good. So picking up some of that thick titanium white, not very much, and starting right in the center of that red, I put my little X, little crisscross strokes. We're focusing on the sky here. So a little bit of white, and I blend out the red first. I just want to get some color up there before moving upwards, and I try not to come back. Now with this color here, I'm watching that area, and I think I realize at some point here, I left a little gap of unpainted base coat right between the crimson and the blue. So just pushing just a little harder, both in the paint application step and the upcoming blending step, I'm going to fill in that gap. But I come back here with a clean brush. I put in a second load. Now you can see me kind of hitting right there at the edge, filling in that gap between the blue and the crimson, working my way up and only up. Clean your brush if you have to go back. Now, I think Bob in this video here, he went over the whole thing with the 2-inch brush and then came back and added a little more bright stuff to the sky. Either way works. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow. Is this yellow enough? It looks yellow enough on the palette. Does it look yellow enough? Not really. It definitely looks brighter, but we want it to look like a little bit more of the sunset, a little bit of the yellow of the sun. So add a little more. Oh, I just dove right into a ton more white, so I got to yellow that down a little. There it is. Now we can see it. Try not to go up into the blue, because blue and yellow gives us that dreaded green sky. Now with my big old brush, blending that color from light to dark. Try not to go back in to the light. The lightest possible touch, just those few brush marks get brushed away. And look at that fun little sky. That little bit of gap between the crimson and the blue, you can see here just by working it during the blending process, I created a slight little band of purple right where the red and the yellow meet. And we've got ourselves a nice glowing sky here. So let us take, Bob called for crimson and Van Dyke brown. Bit more brown than crimson as I've found here. I still wanted to keep it dark, not too red. You find the shade that works for you. These are some very interesting silhouette-y clouds, not a lot of detail to them, just little tiny circles and push some color on. Finding the angles here to make the little circular shapes that you like. And we're going to throw in a couple of stringy clouds too, whichever ones float your boat here. A really low one, really high ones. I've been accused of making Star Destroyer clouds. Kind of see it, right? So I'm always extending my clouds out just so they don't look like the Empire's capital ships or whatever they're called. I really like these little finger clouds that Bob does here, and I try to throw a couple of those in when he does. Um, they're almost like these little hooks, extra little things kind of dragging sideways around the fluffiness of the cloud. Boy, I just did a big skip there. And what I did is I thinned down some titanium white. I added some yellow, but clearly not enough. We're putting paint to paint here, and we really need the highlight to stick to the dark shadow bits, the brown and crimson bits. So we do want these colors to pop also. So you got to practice here and get a sense, and it happens pretty quick here. You get a sense of how much yellow to add to your canvas, to your white, and even a touch of the bright red if you want to warm it up a little. And I'm going to go over this a little stronger Look at that. Just so I could cover up that previous white bit. And here we go. We've got ourselves highlights going on these clouds and definitely can see the yellow now. But it's just the lightest touch. That liquid white thins down your titanium white, and we're just trying to stick it on, really not mixing it in. There is no blending step with these particular clouds. Something I gotta remember if I'm gonna be teaching this one. There is no blending step that has to be done. Some people will do it anyway. But I like to say you can do it, but you don't have to. And finding the spots here where you think that the sunlight is hitting on these taller the clouds that are above the light source, you aim for the bottom edge of the cloud, the clouds that are underneath the light source, they're right there at the horizon. You'd want to put the highlight accordingly on the top. But as always, in your world, you figure out where the light source is and where it's hitting. There's really no rhyme or reason to it in some of these clouds. And there it is. Now, in other episodes, Bob would come across it again with two hairs and some air of the 2-inch brush and soften those clouds into the scene. But today we're just leaving them bold, leaving them bright, leaving them season two. Season two. This is, where Bob is still doing quite a bit of roughness. He learned this technique from his predecessor, Bill Alexander. So some of these first seasons here, he still hasn't refined it to the full Bob-isms of the later seasons. But they still look amazing. Of course, that's how he got to those later seasons by being so amazing in these first 3 seasons. So a little bit, very, very, very small roll. Titanium white, there might be a touch of liquid white snuck in there. Doesn't matter too much. And I know it doesn't quite look straight, but it is when you look at it straight on. The way that this camera is angled off to the side, it might look a little higher in some spots, that horizon line. But just putting some out there. Look at this. And again, this is the third time I did not add enough yellow to my white. But I figured it out here in just a second. I went in and grabbed a little bit more of the yellow. Very lightly, just graze it sideways. And I am hitting that horizon line too, just the 2 hairs of that corner of the brush. And what we're creating is just some distant waves. Don't really see a lot of detail here. The little white caps. Mostly we're just seeing the sun reflected across the water surface, and it just gives that overwhelming brightness. You look out on the water there, so you don't see every single wave. Sometimes you just see an aura of color across the water. This must be another intermission here. And finding the right color is always on your mind when you're painting. Will it work? Will it not? It's all right. Trust yourself. Learn from what you do. What I'm checking out here, after I took a step back, found some color, I think we need more, more reflections. And as I'm putting in these little horizontal lines, just lightly tapping, just letting it extend here and there, but leaving some of the dark. Look at that. Look how it brings out some of the undercolor. So we have a little bit of crimson now glowing across those distant waves. And this is where we get a little crazy. It's liquid white in our titanium white, thinned down, and we're really just using the tips of the bristles. Look how it's just the gentlest touch. That gentle touch pushes the paint off. And then still using the tips of the bristles, I start that almost scratching like motion to let some of that other paint dissolve out and bring out the undercolor. When I'm making these little push-ups, I drag a little color out. Look how I drag the bottom of it out, but leave a little bit of that splash up and it becomes the top of the wave. Let's try that again. Plenty of color right on the tips of the brush. I push up, look at that. And then I drag the bottom away from the pile, away from the top. There we go. And then randomly in between these little wave sets, I do those little sideways scratches, just putting out some color. It's going to start making the waves a little more prominently here. Wherever we have a gap, there's a nice one. They're starting to get bigger now. Grab some color and just drag it down and away, whatever angle you think your water is at. And then just these little sideways scratches, filling in some of the dead spots of the canvas. I want to leave some there on the side blank. We don't really need to make the whole thing super bright waves. This is just where we see the crashing and smashing of the waves. Right here in the center, we've got land coming in, and well, you saw the preview picture. Don't have to paint everything because we are covering things up. Then we get a nice little fresh load of color, and I think I'm going to make a couple more of these big old waves. No, before we make some more waves, we got to put in a little distant rock. Bob called this the California Oregon coast, so there's a lot of big old rocks hanging out there in the water. So it was just Van Dyke Brown. I made a basic rock shape. Now a little dark sienna and the cadmium yellow. Look at that tiny little bit. I'm using the small knife here and just letting it fall across that brown. Not a lot of difference here. Little distant rock, little distant highlight. And then push up, put some water underneath it. And Bob actually drags a little of the water up this time. Push, 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 flick. Look at that. Looks like that water is really churning around those rocks. Well, singular. Churning around that rock. I think that was my favorite stroke of the whole painting is just that little flick added the splashing water. And overlapping that rock a little bit, coming down a little lower, makes this next rock form much, much closer. And when we get closer, things get a little more detailed. So not only are we going to highlight this rock, we're going to put a little vegetation on it too. Same highlight color here, just dark sienna, a touch of the yellow. You could put a little bit of the bright red in it if you want. whatever colors you want reflected. Now, to put a little vegetation on the rock, what would we normally do? What did Bob do here? Well, he took his uh, cadmium yellow, tinted it with sap green, but for me, I didn't even want to get my green out. So I'm just going to mix this with a little bit of phthalo blue. It makes a wonderful green. And the bright red is to dull it, so it's not super bright. There we go. And just pushing up, we create the semblance of vegetation growing. Push, 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 push. A little bit off in the distance. As long as you can see a little out there, no big deal. Once again, say it 1,000 times, we're sticking paint on top of paint. Too much work and it just wants to mix. So I think Bob put a couple little trees in there. He talked about just pushing in a little bit of highlight. And I'm thinning down. Now I think he just used oil. I'm just using a very small amount of paint thinner. And so he puts the leaves in first, and then with the lightest of touches, I just make a couple of sticks to hold up them branches there, trunks, if you will. Not a lot of detail back there. It's not a lot of detail. And here I am thinking it's too dark, so maybe a couple of highlights. Just let that paint, oh, so gentle, fall off. There it is. You can see it. Stop. So yeah, a seed somehow found its way on top of the rock. It grew into a little tree, and it lived. It thrived. Once I'm done highlighting the rock and putting the vegetation on it, we go back into the water. So it's a good idea to have a couple of fan brushes, a couple of different of each type of brush, so you don't have to be cleaning it constantly. Now just swishing in some water around the base, push up, flick, flick, push up, flick, flick. Dragging that water, finding the angles here to make it look like some flat surface. And here comes some more waves. Push, 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 and pull the bottom edge out, creating the color of the water. There's the big crasher. No real curls in this scene here. No big bright areas there where the water's cascading over. But it's getting there. It's getting rough. It's kind of rough water, but not too crashy. I imagine here with that coast, you're seeing some of the rocks, and there's a lot of like eroded rocks under the surface. So that's what's creating all this churn and splashing and crashing of the water around things. The water doesn't have room to gather one big wave, so it's all diffused and just all sorts of crazy stuff happening. And let's see, I'm trying to keep it so it's a little darker out there on the outside. I was talking about that before, keeping the bright light source there under the sun. So off on the edges there, I try to let it, kind of fall away into darkness. And we can figure out how much land to put in just by how far out we stretch the water. It gives you some choices in your composition. So here we go. We're going to make a big old mess here. This is just Van Dyke Brown, dark sienna. I had a little remnant of yellow in there, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. And this is where I'm just cutting it off, cutting off the water. We're standing 50 feet off, 50 feet up, and creating our land. See how I just press in and it creates the cliff edge. Over here, just try to figure out where this protrudes. I'm trying to figure out how not to break my wrist trying to get this on, so I actually put the paint on the opposite side of the knife so I can get a nice clean line there. And this is literally just spreading paint. It's helpful that you don't have a ton of extra paint on there. All that yellow. One reason why I don't go all the way to the edge with the waves makes spreading this on a little easier. Now I'm lightly spreading. I'm scraping up the extra and putting it's just a thin film. You don't need 6 inches of paint on the canvas there. It just needs to be dark. Picking up a little bit of excess and moving it over to where it's needed. I don't have much paint left on the palette here, so I'm just trying to spread this out. Oh, look at that. It's just like evening out the frosting on cake or something. Just dark. Look at that color blocked in and changes the whole perspective of the scene. Now we're up top, looking down on the water. Just basic dark. Van Dyke brown, dark sienna. If you wanted to, all your other colors kind of mixed together. If there was black in there, if you had a little extra crimson and blue, you could darken and just make a dark purpley color too. Dulls it down with the brown. Just dark. That's all we care about. And what we're mixing up here, dark sienna, touch of the yellow, cadmium yellow. If you wanted to make it a little more orangey brown instead of yellowy brown, of course, add a little bit of red to it. Ooh, I don't think I did. This is just like snow on the mountain, grazing it the lightest touch. Purposefully, we're leaving some dark areas. We're going to put our grass and other vegetation there in any of the spots that we leave blank. So you don't even have to worry about filling it all in. Just give it a few passes like that. Change the color a little bit. There it is. I like having a little extra bright highlight to the highlight. Bring out those yellows. When it came to this painting, I wasn't quite sure how much paint to put out. This painting, learn from my mistakes here. Put out a lot of brown, dark sienna, cad yellow. You're going to be going through it on those clouds and especially that land. Bob did a number of things here that we don't normally see. And he got away from doing it, I think, in the later episodes here. But this is putting in the branches and leaves and all this stuff before the trunks. Don't often do that. So just pushing up with the brown and dark sienna. You could have a touch of green, and you know the drill. Whatever colors, as long as it's dark, and just push up. And then right at the base of the cliff, we're going to have some bushes and stuff. Gotta put in the shadows first so the highlights will stand out. Now, Bob uses just a touch of, I think he uses the oil or maybe even just the paint just by itself, but we're going to load our 1-inch brush full of color. A lot of paint right on the ends of the brush here. Cadmium yellow, and we're going to be working in some of that bright red. Look at that. We need a lot of paint in the brush. So when I'm tapping, I'm doing two things. I'm getting the paint right on the tips, and I'm doing it for visuals here to make sure you have enough paint. Turn that handle over so that curve is facing upwards and just give it the gentlest of touches. Reloading the brush often to get that nice bright color. And change the color a little bit with almost every brush full that I load. Change the color slightly. Gives you more variation. And there it is, a little more red in it for that one. Now, if you watch Bob, this episode with Bob, he does some crazy, snaky looking trunks. And I'm just going to try to make mine super quick. A little bit of the Van Dyke Brown mixture, and I just pull down, doink, one little trunk, one little one there. Going back to a highlight color, titanium white, touch of brown in it. Maybe highlight one side of that tree just by pulling down. And with a clean brush, if you wanted to give it that almost birch bark effect, or he does this for palm trees as well, grabs a little bit of the color and pulls it around the trunk. Very gentle to give it more of that cylindrical feel. I don't think here in my scene they're that close where we'd see a great deal of detail, so I don't worry about it too much. Now, changing the color, definitely more bright red in it, helps change the effect, and these are the low lying bushes in front of the trees. Now, the cliff is a little undefined at this point. You can see the bushes living up there, and we're going to clean that up once we get some other stuff in, I think. A little bit of the grass color here, the phthalo blue, cad yellow, touch of red, and just pushing up and moving the brush, pop, pop, pop. We can create that sense of vegetation all snuck in between the rocks and dirt. It's funny. I think that Bob sometimes puts in these little motions here right at the end, just so you can just let go. It's the last parts of the painting here. Just push the brush, let it do the work for you. You've been at it for something like 35 minutes straight or more, maybe an hour or two, and you're just looking to get done. Well, this is what creates the effect very quickly. Now, just using the corner of a clean brush, you see here I just dragged straight down, and it gets that more verticality to the rocks. Now, I pull a little bit of land right under those bushes, and then just give it a little vertical sheer cliff effect. Look at that. So fast to create that little space for the trees to grow from. Push a couple little sticks and twigs there, and I think we just about got it. I want to thank you guys so much for sticking with me today. Looks like we're throwing in a couple little trees off in the distance there with the little liner brush. Come back with just a little bit of that grass mixture. Change the color, of course. And we get a little tree off in the distance. A little more yellow in it. That'll make it pop. And keep adding all those fine details as you like. With that being said, we'll get into the signing of the painting here. And I hope you stay with me. I hope you like, subscribe, and want to get notified if you want to. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time.